Hey, my name's Brianne Dick. I'm the co-founder of the Visionaries CEO Academy. And today I want to talk about a tool that you can use to really simply keep your team all on the same page without you having to get into the details. It's called the communications rhythm. And this is one of the cultural systems that we help our clients to install in their business so that they can free themselves up from the day-to-day. They can have a team that takes care of all of the details, and they're really able to focus on the things they want to focus on, whether that's inside the business or outside the business. So let's talk about team communication, and let's talk about why this is such a problem for some people in the first place. Well, when we think about how most people think about solving the communication problem within the team, first off, we need to recognize that every time you add someone to a team, you make it so there's more communication, right? If it's just you and one other person, there's only one communication pathway. As soon as you add a third person, well, now there's three communication pathways. If we add a fourth, well, now we've got, what is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 communication pathways. If we add another, you can see how every time we add people, things get more complicated. And this is where people run into problems with communicating as a team, is they grow the team. And in order for people to communicate with each other, it just becomes really overwhelming that there's so much going on. There's so many moving pieces that it's really hard to be able to know, is everyone getting the right information? Are people getting information that they don't need? Are they getting information that they do need? We want to be able to have a way of communicating without overburdening people. And so what happens is that very often we try to solve this problem by throwing all this stuff at it. So we start having a ton of meetings. We start trying to use things like Slack, and we have a million Slack channels. We end up with a fancy project management system, and we try and find the perfect project management system. And all of these things, they take up time and energy, right? You end up having meetings all the time. You've got 40 Slack channels and notifications going off all the time. You've got a project management system. And are you supposed to be talking about the project in Slack or about in the project management system? And are you having team meetings or one-on-one meetings, or how does this all work, right? It becomes a lot. We have a lot of volume, and we actually end up with a lot of noise, where there's so much noise going on that it can be hard to be able to figure out what should we be focused on, what's really important as we go on here. And then what this leads you to is, because there's so much noise, there's so many moving pieces, there's so much going on, you end up in a situation where things can feel out of control, right? Where it's like there's so many things going on, you never know where things are at. You never know what to do when things go off the rails because you find out about it too late, or you got 5 different systems to check to try and find one piece of information. And it can feel as though things are out of your control and like stuff is happening and you don't know what it is, and not in a good, comfortable way. So what we're trying to create when we have this communications rhythm, when we have this system and practice in place, is we want to be able to have something that is simple, but isn't just simple in terms of the number of moving pieces, but something that is actually empowering for your team, something that allows your team to essentially self-manage, right? This is kind of a buzzword that you may have heard, the idea of a self-managing team. Really what that means is that the team is communicating among themselves. Stuff is happening, it's being done, and you're not having to be directly involved in making those things happen. That means that stuff's getting done without you having to chase people around. So you end up having time freedom. You can focus on other things. You don't have to worry about where things are at. You don't have to be bombarded by notifications, and you don't have to be concerned that if you turn your notifications off, that you're going to go back in later and there's going to be things that have blown up, right? Because you've got a self-managing team, you're now able to spend your time on other things. And what that ultimately gives you is peace of mind. Our clients have told us, peace of mind, there we go. Our clients have told us that when they focus on the communication rhythm, it really is a rhythm. It's a framework that allows them to relax. It's like there's a steady beat, a heartbeat to the business that they can trust to be there. They don't have to be trying to force things to happen. And that allows them to know what's happening in the business at the right time, with the right frequency. They know when to ask which questions, and that just allows them to have such calm, because they know what they need to know when they need to know. So that's why the communication rhythm is such an important piece of business growing and of building a great culture within your business. Now, if you want a copy of the workbook that I'm working through here and you're on Facebook, you can just go ahead and comment worksheet and we'll be able to grab you a link where you can download this. If you're watching this elsewhere, there should already be a link that you can use to download this worksheet, because in this worksheet, I'm going to show you all the elements of the communication rhythm, as well as some of the templates that we use to put it in place and to actually implement it and install it in our business and in our client's business. So let's go ahead and look at this from a big picture view. When we're talking about communications rhythm, first thing we have to know is what is being communicated? What are we trying to communicate? Well, this all comes down to the different types of decisions, because ultimately that's what we need to be communicating is before a decision is made, if we need input, we need to be getting that information. And then once a decision is made, we need to be able to communicate that out. And so there's different types of decisions that happen in a business. There's decisions about vision, AKA, why are we doing this and where are we going? Why are we doing this and where are we going? There we go. There's decisions about strategy. Strategy is, when should we change direction? When should we do this? When should we do that? It's about priorities. Then there's planning. Planning is about what should we accomplish? What does success look like? What is the scope of this project? What are our KPIs? What are our success measures? What are we trying to accomplish? And then we have execution. And execution is about how things get done. So how do we write the copy on the sales page? How do we connect with our clients? How do we answer questions that come in? How, what, when, why, and where are all of the decisions that get made in the business. And of course, there's who is responsible for making of these decisions. The thing to realize is that not all of these decisions should be made with the same frequency. And that's where we get ourselves into trouble. We think about what we talked about where, there's so many moving pieces and so many things needing to be communicated. And that's often coming because we're mixing up the timelines for these things. If you're changing your vision every week or every month or every quarter or even every year, you're going to create a term that Gina Wickman calls entrepreneurial whiplash, which is where you're changing direction so fast that your team can't keep up. Your vision really is a long-term thing. This is your legacy work. It's the kind of thing that is going to be 10 plus years in the making. Of course, you're going to evolve it. Of course, you're going to be wanting to revisit this on an annual basis. But really, when we're talking vision, we're talking big picture. We're talking about an annual or longer timeline. Then there's strategy. Strategy is about our priorities, right? It's about when we're going to focus on this piece or that piece. When is it the right time to enter a new market? When is it a good time to create a new product? These are strategic decisions. And these are the kinds of decisions that you want to be making on an annual and quarterly basis. Right? You want to be making these in terms of your strategic plan for the year, and then you want to be able to break that into quarterly plans. Speaking of plans, that's the next level. Planning is what happens. We're figuring out what does success look like. This is what we want to have happen on a quarterly basis. This is what's going to happen maybe on a monthly basis. But we're talking about what needs to happen. We're talking about project plans. We're talking about metrics. We're talking about KPIs. We're talking about these kinds of things. And then, of course, execution is how these things happen on a day-to-day and a week-to-week basis. So it's really important that we keep these things being communicated at a timeline that is reflective of how often these decisions change. If we don't talk about the execution on a day-to-day or week-to-week basis, we're going to find that there's big gaps that start to happen. On the same token, if we're changing our strategy constantly, if it's just a random Tuesday and we're like, I think we should create a new product, that might work if you have just you and one other person on your team. But if you have a team of 5, 6, 8, 10 people, that's going to create problems and ripple effects. And so this is where this idea of the communication rhythm really becomes so important. Now, it's not just about these decisions in particular, but as I've suggested, it's about how these decisions influence each other. And so when it comes to the elements of a communications rhythm, and we're thinking about this as a system, what are the pieces of the communication system that we need to have? Really, it comes down to 4 things. The first is that if we think about that pyramid, we need a way of translating vision into strategy and also for our strategy to feed back into our vision. We need a way to have our strategy inform our plans. And we also need a way to reflect back on how did our plans go? How did we do with our metrics? Did we reach our goals? Was our project a success? Because that's going to affect our priorities. That's going to affect our strategy. We also need a way, of course, to be able to close the gap between the plan and the execution, right? We want to know what is the goal and how are we going to make it happen, but we also want to know how are things going? Are we on track to be able to accomplish what we need to accomplish? And then finally, there's what we call the execution loop. And the execution loop is the information that happens within the execution when it's information being passed back and forth between team members. And, one person's doing one piece, another person's doing another piece. We need to have this execution loop where constant communication is happening about how things are happening with the people that are responsible for making it happen. And so that's where we come to this idea of a communications rhythm. We have an annual strategy where we're translating vision into strategy. We have quarterly planning where it's taking your plans and turning them into action. Quarterly planning where we take our strategy rather and turning it into plans. Then we have the idea of having our plans and turning them to action items. That's your tactical meetings. Then we have our opportunity to have one-on-one check-ins, to have daily check-ins. And these go both directions, right? So you've got daily check-ins. This is the execution loop. We've got these bi-weekly tactical meetings, which is not only a chance for the leadership to be able to talk to the individual team members, but a chance for the team members to share what's going on with the leadership team as well. And so you can see for each of these elements of the communications rhythm, we've got an idea of who should be involved. Is it the visionary, the person who's focused on the where and the why? Is it the leadership team? That's the people who are responsible for those strategic decisions, those priorities. Is it managers? Is it people who are making plans, who are setting projects, who are managing other people and managing the work? Is it the helpers and the implementers, the people that are doing the work? And the truth is that as your business grows, you may not have a different visionary than a leader, than a manager. You might be doing all of those things, and that's great. And so with our clients, we do these things where we take the initiative and we lead them in it. But what's important to recognize is that those things will change as your business grows. So, for example, let's just hop into this bi-weekly or weekly tactical meeting. This is your team meeting. And when your team is small, you're just going to have everyone on the team. It's just going to be one meeting. As your business grows, might be multiple meetings for multiple departments, each with their own manager. And so what you need to ask yourself is, if this is the system element, we know we need to have some kind of communication on a weekly or bi-weekly basis, and that communication needs to be working on bridging that gap between the plans and the executions. We want to know, how are we doing on our plans? What's working? What's not working? The question then becomes, for where the business is right now, what are the practices in terms of what this looks like in our business? So is this something that happens in a meeting? How often is the meeting? Who attends the meeting? Is the meeting held in Zoom? Is it done in Slack? What does that look like? Some clients of ours have just taken to, they don't have a meeting and they just have a project management system. And they just check in as a team on Slack and they look at what's going on. They do a status report. Everyone reports their status and it's great. Some of our clients don't even use a project management tool for that. They just use Slack. They have a check-in and check-out channel where the week starts and everyone says, this is what I'm working on this week. And then the week ends and they're like, this is what I got accomplished this week, right? This is all different ways of tackling this same thing. And it's really a question of, what is the practice? What does this look like for you to put it into place? And the question of practices is not only for the size of your team and the size of your business, but it's also about your culture and your values. So what do your values tell you? How can you demonstrate your culture in the way that these meetings happen? For example, is it really important that you are collaborating? Is that a value of your business? If so, you may want to have this as a meeting. You might want to have someone different lead the meeting every week so that it's not just one person. On the other hand, if you really value independence, you might want to use one of these other methods. So you want to think about which of these methods is going to really further the values that we have in place for the business. Whatever you decide, if you haven't been having this meeting, what you want to do is you want to then say, when are we going to put this into place? So are we going to start this next week, next month, next quarter? When do we want to roll this out? And so when we're thinking about the strategic communications and the communications rhythm with our clients, this is where we start. We say, hey, these are all the elements that you need for where you're at right now and what your values are. What makes the most sense in terms of the practices that should be in place? What is it going to look like? How are you going to demonstrate your values? And when are you going to start doing that? And then once they've gone through and they've mapped all of those things out, then they can start to implement. And I'm not going to go through all of these tools in detail, but these are just some of the outputs, right? Your strategy can be a one-page strategy. You can have your strategy turned into plans through the use of a big rocks calendar. You can have a one-page plan, which is your project plan for either for the business as a whole or for an individual project. You can have strategic reviews that happen. You can have weekly reviews where you're asking these questions. And these are some of the elements of the system. But again, what we're really talking about when we're talking about the communications rhythm, as with any cultural system and framework, is that we have the system, and that's what this in this workbook. Then we have your values, which is how you want these things to be expressed. What do you value? How do you want your team to show up? How do you want to be in the world? And the practices are in between. The practices are, how are we going to take the elements of the system? How are we going to take our annual planning, quarterly planning, team meetings, one-on-ones, those kind of things? How are we going to put that into place with where our business is and what our values show so that we can create cultural practices that are relevant? Because it's those cultural practices that ultimately are going to make the difference and allow you to have, if we think about what we had back on this page where we were talking about what we want to have out of this, if you want to have that idea of a self-managing team, if we want to have the idea of time freedom, and if you want to have the ability to just have peace of mind, those are things that come by having the right communications rhythm in place, by having the right cultural practices in place, so that you can know that your team is empowered, that they're taking care of things, that things are getting communicated with the right frequency in the right way, because that's what's going to give you the time, profit, and energy you want as you scale. So again, if this has been valuable for you and you want a copy of this worksheet so that you can start thinking about what your own communications rhythm is, you can comment. If you're on Facebook, just say, I'm not sure if I said worksheet or workbook, either one of those will work, just drop a comment. If you're watching this anywhere else on the internet, there should already be a link and you'll be able to grab a copy of the workbook, fill it out, and be able to build the communications rhythm that'll work for you.